Hi, good evening, everyone. Just a quick introduction. I mean, first of all, before we get into it, a big thanks for all of you for coming today. After hosting over 20 virtual Women in Tech events through lockdown, it's so great to actually finally meet people, be in the same room as you all, network. So thank you all for coming. To introduce Women in Tech Republic, so we're an employee-led effort aimed to encourage, obviously, more diversity in the world of technology, aimed to create a safe space for women within the world of tech, a platform where we can motivate each other, learn from each other, be inspired, share success stories, the list goes on. With obviously this event, speaking around career growth, massive thanks to Masha, Gisela and Sarah for coming along. Obviously, I'm really looking forward to and learning from you all. And I guess, we'll pass over to Katerina, Chief People Officer, Dojo. I'll let you introduce.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's lovely to see so many people on a Wednesday evening. Thank you for coming. So I was asked to do two things. One was to welcome you and explain about Dojo, and second was to explain why diversity is important for us. So what is Dojo? How many of you have paid on a card machine that says Dojo and has recognized it? Only, come on, guys. So we are everywhere now, right? So what are we doing? We are absolutely making a revolution on the payment systems. And the reason why we are doing that is because we are really targeting the high street, the merchants, which is the place where we can have actually a lot of impact from an economical perspective, because this is the fabric of economies, is where jobs are created. And this is exactly what we are doing, right? We are empowering the experience economy, growing incredibly fast. And that's why when you're going to pay for your coffee or you're going to pay for your meal, you're seeing more and more of our Dojo card payment systems, which makes us incredibly proud. So why is diversity so important for us? The interesting thing is, a company like us, which is growing so fast, what makes us growing fast is our culture. And is a culture of innovation, is a culture of collaboration, is a culture of learning fast, failing fast. And the only way to do that is by being creative, is by bringing different perspectives, is by enlarging the horizons. And the only way you can do that is actually through diversity. Because if everyone thinks the same way, you don't have that. There's no creativity. So the business case for diversity and for inclusion is a very obvious one. Now, for me, as a woman and the mother of two children, two girls, diversity has a very personal meaning to me as well. Because I think our life is much more enriched if we are surrounded by diverse people, people that challenge our beliefs, that challenge the way we are thinking the world. And the interesting thing with that as well is that from a societal perspective, we bring a world that will be much more equal. So there is a business case, there's a societal case as well, and then I think there's a very personal case for all of us. So having said that, I think there's lots to discuss today, and this is an opportunity for us to challenge each other, share perspectives, identify best practices, what can we do better? And hopefully this is like just the beginning of a conversation.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again all for coming tonight. I won't talk for long because I'm sure you all want to hear from the speakers. So I'm going to introduce Masha, who works at Monzo as a software engineer, and she'll be talking about top tips for an effective interview process.
Hey, everyone. So why is this important? As a software engineer, I've obviously been I do hear it, I hope. I've obviously been to many interviews as a candidate, but also active interviewer, currently at Monzo, and before that in my ex-employer Facebook. And what I learned is that many candidates, even though they have great skills, experience, everything that we are looking for, they still don't perform to their full potential. And there are many avoidable reasons. So I'm here with a very practical list of things one can do to improve their performance and actually smart the interview. So first problem is that interviews are stressful. Obviously, it's okay to be stressed. I mean, I'm stressed right now, but when it interferes with your performance, it's important to know how to avoid it and what we can do to fix it. So obvious thing, prepare for your interviews. Ideally, we should think about interviewing as a skill that you build through repetition, practice, feedback loop. You should be interviewing even if you are not looking for a job. This is when you have a lot of freedom and time and opportunities to not worry about actual interviews. If you don't have luxury of time, do mock interviews. There are a lot of communities where you can have free mock interview, you can pay for interview, or you can ask your friend to do the interview. It not only will help you with the confidence and practice and going through the process, you will get feedback on your hard skills and how do you perform. So this is one top recommendation that I can suggest. The other one is very simple. Get enough sleep before your interview. Talking from personal experience, having parties before interviews is not a great thing. And even if something happened and you were stressed enough to not fall asleep, know how to fix the situation. Get your coffee ready, get your energy drink, whatever makes you work. Have that ready, especially if the interview is in the morning and you will not have time to recover. Be ready for emergency situations. Third thing is remote interviews. They give us the freedom to be in control of the environment, so we can have a lot of notes. If you are worried about that you're going to forget something, some formula, some data structure thing, some numbers, whatever is that, put them on notes, sticky notes, put them on your wall, or do a split screen and no one will ever see that you have some notes, and you will have confidence to actually checking something that is really so meaningless. Even if you want to go further and increase your motivation even more, learn what motivates you, what puts you in that top 100% productivity spirit. Get your motivational playlist ready. Go do workout, whatever works for you. For example, for me, first, when we just started working from home, all my important meetings, I was wearing my favorite shoes. No one thinks that, but I knew this is how I performed the best. And if it's silly, it works, not that silly. So just know what works for you. And also remember, interviews are not exams. No one expects that you're going to answer all the questions correctly at once, in one go. If you don't remember something, just tell your interviewer, I don't know. They either will give you a hint or they will ask you, how would you perform? How would you figure out what to do in real life? Who would you ask for help? Where would you go? They're looking for a person to work with. They are not looking for a replacement for a machine or some kind of. So just tell them what would you do. And it's important to have a good connection and build good impressions. Remain human, and interviewers will help you to perform the best. The second problem that I'm really seeing is that interviews are really misunderstood. And the more the misunderstood part is behavioral interviews. You were talking about tech interviews, or maybe probably even other interviews. And the problem they misunderstood is because of a tech industry, it's very hard to say, how will you perform in like onboarding takes ages, and employers came up with some heuristics that like helps them to judge, but those heuristics are not 100% correct, and they are obviously vague. And when they're asking those questions, like, tell me about last time you had a conflict or something, they really want to get an answer of one of these three questions. Like, do you have the skills to do the job? How vague and complex problems you can solve? And will you be affecting working in their specific environment with people they already have? So all the answers you're giving, they should be formed to give them as much information for these questions as possible. So you need to learn about the company. Some companies expect a lot of ownership. Some of them require a lot of collaboration. Some of them are only like focused on being as much effective as possible. Learn what the company of your choice values and frame your answers to highlight those features the most. Like if you really care about performing that interview, you need to know what they want to hear. Also, it's really important to emphasize own contributions. It's not the time to be humble and tell about how the team solved the problem and we all got together and discussed it. You need to tell about your value. And if there is a cool story that describes like the team impact, but you haven't really done that much, choose a different story. Your story needs to highlight your value. That's very important thing. Another pattern that I've seen is that often people think that you need to tell how you quickly dealt with the problem, have you fixed the bug, just looking in a Slack message or whatever it is. It really gives not enough information about the situation. It's much interesting for interviewer to hear a story where you failed, where you reflected on your failure, when you learned some lessons, implementing some strategies to work on that, and you improved as a person or as an employee based on that failure. It gives a lot of more signal to them, and it definitely shows you more deeply. So use that when possible. Another one, and probably my favorite, but the most hard to explain, is to document your how before coming to the interview. Funny is that when interviewer is asking about your previous experience, they really want to know how will you perform in the future. And they really want to know that your previous success is not a coincidence, that you've been conscious and you knew what you're doing. So there is this exercise. Think about hypothetical situation. How would you give a hard feedback to a person? What strategies would you use? What if they don't accept it? Like document this as an algorithm and then map this algorithm, those steps to your real life scenario, to your example. Use this mapping, this structure during interview, and this will help you to bring that reflection, to build to bring that awareness that you actually had a plan, you knew how to deal with that situation, and you will be able to deal with that again. That's a thing that works not only for interviews, it's essentially a framework to deal with different situations throughout your career, but it's also a tool to use when you have a story to tell. And the last one, don't forget to ask very meaningful questions. First, because asking a question is a way for you to learn about company. Is a company really the place you want to work in? And also, this is your last tool to make an impression, to show them you really care about them, you're motivated, you want to work with them. This is your last opportunity. And making impression is very important, because if they are in the edge of making decision, they would definitely lean towards hiring a person that want to work for them, for that specific company that's very motivated. So, and even if you don't pass, if you keep great connection, they will invite you for future interviews, they will give you feedback, they will give you suggestions on how to perform better. And I've seen a lot of people that join their company of dreams in their second attempt or third attempt, and it's totally amazing. Thank you so much for your attention. Do you have any questions?
What advice do you have for finding out what your motivations are?
Apart from like trying different things and trying like understand which of them do you like or you don't, I think that you could try to read about different cultures, different company cultures, and trying to understand what fits your ideal picture of the environment, what doesn't. Like obviously working in different environments gives you a lot more exposure, but it also takes a lot more time. So I think reading is a good proxy for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm no expert, but I think it's really like digging deep into what it is you really enjoy, and you can kind of find your motivations from there, right? So I guess, yeah, just really thinking about what you love and how that's going to make you want to get up out of bed in the morning. But yeah, on to the next question. I have no experience in tech. How would I be able to get a job? Dojo are hiring, by the way.
There are a lot of different techniques you can try to. You can try to contribute to open source or build some side projects, something very simple but cool, or something that you would be proud to tell about to your interviewer. Build, I don't know, a little game that you would want to play, or a little website, or there was a story about a person who didn't have experience, but they decided, I'm going to do a challenge and like build a small website every day and write a blog about it. So you can always have an opportunity to do something like public to show your skills, even if you don't have experience.
If you had a magic wand to create an interview process to enable candidates to succeed, what would it look like?
I would ideally put candidates to work with a team for a week, and then get them like first-hand experience with how it's going to look like, and I think that would be ideal, but it's totally not realistic.
What's the best interview process you've ever had, and why?
I think with me, it was about flexibility. So being able to choose Do I do it everything in one day, or do I split it? Do I do live coding or take home challenge? What is like the best way for me to like schedule it in the morning, in the evening? What are the hours? This like flexibility and the feeling that the interviewer is trying to accommodate. This is something that made the process really stood out.
Any advice for interviewing a candidate for a job more senior than your own position?
That's a tricky one, obviously. Yeah. Usually there is some guidance that like really helps you to understand what the company is looking for. Also, you can think about senior engineers in your team. How do they work? How do they behave? What kind of problems they are working on? So this is also like a good heuristic to understand, will they be able to deal with similar challenges, and will they perform in similar environment?
Yeah, we'll have one more question and then we'll pass over to the next speaker. So yeah, do you want to pick the question, Masha?
So which company gave the most constructive feedback? Monzo, this is why I like them. They've been very open about feedback, like you performed well here and not well here. And I really like that transparency. So that was very helpful. And the next question there was, can you be successful in tech without education? Yes, 100%.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Masha. You was great.
Hello, guys. I'm Serena, so co-founder alongside Alicia and Daisy at Third Republic. Just here to introduce Gisela, who's talking about choosing the right support group.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So today I'm going to be speaking about a topic that is very close to my heart. I will try not to cry, but I don't promise anything. I will be talking about finding your professional support group, finding your people. And that is especially important when things get rough. And as life would have it, things got rough for me in May. And I'm going to tell you about that journey and how that professional support group helped me and how I learned along the way an importance in that I haven't reflected maybe before. But before we dive into that, let me introduce myself. So I'm Gisela, people call me Gisela. I've been in the computer science tech space for the last 13 years. I studied computer science back in Argentina. I did some internships in the US, France. Then I graduated and moved here to London, my new home. I became a software engineer, then a senior software engineer, then an engineer lead, then an engineer manager. I have recently discovered that I like writing, and I created this personal page that you can check out, where I will be writing about engineer leadership and tech organizations. Check it out, give me your feedback. Feedback is a gift. I will also have my Twitter handle. So if you want to say hi, give me feedback about this talk or just connect, it's going to be there. So now back to that May story. Back in May, I was in Argentina visiting family. I was also sorting through my mom's stuff. She passed away, and we needed to go through her stuff to decide what was going to charity and what we wanted to keep. I was in the second day of doing that. It's a full immersive experience and a very tough one. I started to receive WhatsApp messages from my team, my manager, and people at work. Everyone saying, I know you're away, I know you have a lot on your plate, but something big has happened. You should probably check your email. I go to check my email. The CEO had around a mass redundancies. They have fired around 150 to 200 people, but nobody knew who. The email would say that you would receive a second email saying either you're safe, or a calendar invite, which meant you're definitely not safe. I got the calendar invite. I was very confused. I got a promotion in March, and now I was being fired in May. I was really confused. I called my manager, who I adore. She's the best manager I ever had. And I tell her, like, am I being fired? What's happening? And she honestly didn't know. No one had told her about this. But she told me I will find out, and she found out later that day, and she told me, yes, effectively, it seems like a fire. It was very surreal, and kind of time froze. But then, fast forward 2 weeks, I'm back in London. By the time I reach home, all my access have been deactivated. So I say goodbye to my team over a call organized on Hangout. Well, half the team was not in the company anymore, but we all hung out together anyway. And as I sat there in my living room thinking about, okay, what's next? I started also to think about, are there any consolations to this quite bad period in my life? And there were the people. So many people at this time within the organization, because no one else knew, reached out to me saying, I can't believe this is happening to you. I'm super mad. Let me know if I can do anything. Do you want a referral? I know someone, blah, blah, blah. And then the news started to get out, and news articles started to pick in on this. And then more people wrote to me, like friends I know from a previous job, someone I have met at a conference, someone I had helped getting a job before, just people. And then the news continued to spread, and more people reached out to me. And the support was truly, truly overwhelming. The way I like to think about networks and your professional support group is the way I think about city lights. So if you stand at the top of a hill and you look down and it's day, so no lights will be on, and you won't really know how far-reaching that network is. You won't know how powerful. But then the night comes, and you will need to turn it on, to switch it on. And this was probably the first time in all my career where I had to switch my network on. That day on the living room, I switched it on by first reaching out to my two mentors, informal mentors who I adore, asking their advice. And then I tweeted, because I tweet a lot. And again, the amount of people just multiplied, the amount of people that reach out to me with support, with love, with care, just multiplied. And also with opportunities, right? Very interesting opportunities. And it really felt like it turned on. So I guess this process made me reflect a lot on how did I build this network? Because it was quite organic. Like I didn't really do a conscious effort over the years. but I now see how important and how impactful it is. So how do we get there? This is my advice. The first one would be live into your values and be candid about what you care about. So speak about hard things when you think they are wrong. And you may think this is maybe counterintuitive in the professional arena. You may think this will alienate people. Well, it will alienate the people that don't have your values. And at the end of the day, it will bring you closer to communities and organizations that share your values and where eventually you want to be and you want to build stuff. My second advice is probably pretty obvious, but I'm still going to say it. Be kind and help people whenever you can. Pay it forward and keep helping and volunteering your time. Answering honestly to how are you? So when people reach out, the way to create an honest connection, a deep link between people, is reaching to that vulnerability and avoiding the urge to say, oh, everything is fine. This is nothing. I mean, there may be some rational part of you that says, this is a problem and it will get solved. But there is also an emotional point of view that is struggling. And there is a lot of value in sharing that struggle honestly. My other advice would be accept help and ask for help if you need it. So we are all human, and perfectionism is a bad coping mechanism. So ask for help when you struggle. And when people write to you, hey, how are you? I'm here. Accept it. Treasure it. And my last one would be empathy. So check how people on your networks are doing. Do it today. When was the last time you wrote to a colleague, to an ex-classmate, to ask how they are doing? And maybe you can follow my network lead, and if you see an article, you can reach out to your friends in that company. At the end of the day, it's all about people. I really hope you got something either useful or inspiring out of this. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
So we have a few questions. So the first one, can you share your experience finding mentors?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the mentors have been my managers at work. One of my mentors, I follow her on Twitter and admire her tremendously for a very long time. And then at some point I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to write to her. And I wrote to her and asked for help. See, advice from the previous life. Asked for help with something concrete. And she said yes. And we started chatting and we created a bond.
Are there any particular tips for building your network in a virtual environment?
Yeah, that is tricky. I think over there, you want to turn to writing. So you want to turn to social media, blogging. You want to be able to create connection with people. And the only way to do that, I think, is through writing, which also writing is a tremendously important skill. So it's good to invest in that.
Nice. And another question, there is a culture to ask how you are without wanting the real answer. When do you know how to answer honestly?
I always ask her honestly. Don't ask me how I am if you don't want an honest answer. I mean, for real, like, I mean, you can give a short or a long answer, but I would always be honest.
Okay, amazing. I think that's all the questions from there for now. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
And our last speaker of the evening is actually Sarah Persov. She's a software engineer, a team lead, an incredible, talented lady. So the floor is yours.
My talk is about overcoming obstacles in career progression, but with a focus on discrimination and sexism. Slightly different vibe to the rest of the evening, but it's something I'm really passionate about. Now, if I have to summarize, one second, just when you lie down. If I have to summarize, what are the average obstacles that women face? It's the lack of representation, the normalization of discrimination, double standards, a lack of job security when thinking about children and childcare, and how all of these issues also impact negotiating pay and promotions. Regardless of your gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, mental, physical health, everyone is going to face obstacles at some point. What sucks is that women essentially are not starting on equal footing because we're women. We naturally stand out. And I think that lack of representation can be really isolating. I know I felt isolated when I'm the only woman in a room, and I feel like I have to fight even harder than my male colleagues just to be heard. And then double standards come into play, because if I bring up something, it's because I'm a woman. I'm being overly emotional if I call out somebody lying. And this lack of representation is a really interesting thing, because companies are trying. Now, some companies are trying just because it looks good on paper, but a lot of companies are genuinely trying. And one of the things that came out of that is positive discrimination. And me personally, I've had a really bad experience with that. During university, I got chosen to go on a really good internship. And what I didn't know was that my male best friend at the time had also applied. This was during our second year of university. And one day I found out that I'd got it, and I was telling him about it, and he blew up at me. The only reason I apparently got that internship was because I'm a woman and I have a service dog. I look good on paper, I look good in, photography, I'm a good diversity hire. And instantly, all of the hard work I'd done, my own merits, my values, they didn't matter, because I'm a woman. And for me, I find that positive discrimination has led to maybe an increase in diversity, but a reduction in inclusion. And that's really what the lack of representation is. How can you easily find mentors or leadership you can identify who you know has had the same experiences or similar ones to you when there aren't any other women in those leadership roles, or there aren't people with obvious, health problems, or whatever it is that you feel you're lacking representation. And because of that lack of representation and the fact that we automatically stand out, it leads to this normalization of unconscious bias, of passive-aggressive sexism. But before I get into that, I want to talk about how we can start changing things, how things are already improving. My biggest thing is talk about it. Be open, be honest. Stop talking about things as taboo. If you encounter issues, you need to go and talk to people. And even if it makes them uncomfortable, even better. It means you're forcing them to confront that unconscious bias. And I think this is such an important thing when you're thinking about the normalization of discrimination. I know I've been asked, what are my plans for having children in interviews? Doesn't matter, that's not legal. They get away with it. I know that I've been told at times that, I need to be more smiley. I need to smile when I'm talking to people because otherwise I'm coming across as rude. My male colleagues never got told that. I once had someone write a complaint to a manager of mine because I didn't use enough smileys and exclamation marks in messages to them, and they thought I was being rude. A week later, my male colleague word for word copied my message. They didn't get a write-up. And I called that out. I said, that is sexism. Why is it that as a woman, I have to be bubbly, friendly, you know, this idea of what you have? And unfortunately, the management ignored that. However, my colleagues didn't. And that's where talking about it is really important, because the more you talk about it, the more allies you gain. And the more allies you gain, the more we're going to change. We're not going to be able to change things like the normalization of discrimination until we get others on board, because otherwise you're fighting a battle that you're going to lose. You're pushing up against the tide. Events like this are absolutely fantastic for overcoming these type of obstacles, because it is growing your support network. It's meeting more people you can identify with. And you'll go and you might talk about it at work, and it might just plant a seed on people who might think about things differently. I think it's really hard to talk about discrimination without talking about double standards. Double standards is something that we're ultimately very likely to face as women. There's a huge double standard in the way we're expected to present ourselves, the way we show emotion, the way we dress. I once read a quote online about how one of the greatest things men have ever done is convince the world that when they are angry, they're not emotional. When women are angry, we're overly emotional. There's nothing wrong with emotion. Emotion is a natural human thing. It's about learning to direct it into something useful. I get incredibly angry when I think about these obstacles. All of my friends will agree, if I've had a couple of drinks, I will literally rant about it for ages. But it's that passion and that anger, which is overly emotional, that leads me to do things like this. And it leads me to talk to people, and it leads me to help encourage others to talk out. And with stuff like the double standards, I know I keep saying it, but talking about it, because something I've noticed, the same with unconscious bias, people genuinely don't realize. People have never stopped to think, how are they treating you via how are they treating others? And I remember once I was talking to somebody in a different job, and I brought up how unfair it was that I had male colleagues being promoted over me, even though they did nowhere near less work, and by their own metrics, I should have been promoted. And they went, oh, that's just the way it is. Why? They couldn't really respond to that. And it's because of everything I've spoken about, we are inherently having to do that extra fight. And this is particularly important when it comes to stuff like negotiating pay and promotions, but also the lack of job security in relation to children. I don't have children yet, but I know that a significant amount of my planning to do with my career is actually about when I want children. Because in my head, I know I need to be at a certain point in my career that I'm going to feel comfortable to take that time out of my work and not be concerned that when I come back, I've been demoted or my team's been merged, something I've heard a lot, where you were in a leadership position and, well, you've not been demoted, that role just doesn't exist. And the double standards here come into play, because I've spoken to many, many male colleagues. None of them have ever been asked, when are you planning on having kids? Because ultimately, there's still this idea that all the childcare is on the women. How are you gonna, handle being in a leadership position and childcare? As if, the idea that if you do have a partner, they might not share it. And something that I found that really helps with that concern is when you're interviewing and looking at benefits offered, don't just look at maternity leave, look at what they offer for paternity leave. Our government still doesn't offer good paternity leave whatsoever. It's actually quite atrocious. But companies can choose how they want to do it. So if you see that there's a company that offers equal and shared maternity and paternity leave, especially not just for biological children, but for adoption, fostering, you know you're going into an atmosphere that's going to be supportive and actually not treat men and women as different when it comes to parents. And I think something that's so hard is that because of the lack of representation, because of that constant passive aggressive, putting down, women are significantly more likely to get imposter syndrome, to question if they are a diversity hire, to not feel empowered to negotiate, to not have, your self-esteem gets knocked down. And when you don't have people that you can lean on and ask, say, was that message rude? Am I being crazy, or is that out of order? If you don't have that network, you're not going to start getting empowered. And, I think it's such a crucial part of it is actually going out of your way to talk about stuff. Sorry, Swinny, shush. He's doing his job, I promise. He's fine though. Negotiating pay and promotions is really hard. Before I joined this company, I didn't have the self-esteem to do that. I didn't feel like I could actually say, this is the value I bring. I deserve more money. I deserve that title change. And when I would try, I'd get knocked down. And because I didn't have always the strong enough support network to say they're wrong, it took me a really long time to do the most important thing I could do in overcoming that obstacle: leave. It sounds silly, but this idea that you have to be loyal, you have to overcome that obstacle in that company is antiquated. That's not how the world works. That's not how tech works. If you're not in a company that can actually empower you and do what, provide you with what you need and recognize and celebrate you, they don't deserve you. People keep saying about how, women in tech, how good it is for companies. And great, use that. Use the fact that you're a woman to stand out. Use the fact that people will remember you because you're not fitting the norm to actually stick in people's minds. Because if you do network and you do show your value and believe in yourself and have other people believe in you too, then it's going to be so much easier when it comes to that time where if you get told no and they refuse to talk, they refuse to discuss why, you can leave. You can use your support network and find something else. And you can talk to people and say, how does your company treat this? Because when you're constantly being told that you're not good enough, and you're constantly being told you have to fight so much harder for basic respect, how are you going to be empowered to fight back and fight for what you deserve? Instead, you should be finding somewhere that you don't have to fight. Instead, they're celebrating you. They're recognizing you. Having managers who actually go, yeah, they're doing a really good job. They're working off their ass. They deserve more money. They deserve that promotion. Working with you on how you can improve it. And this comes back to just leaving the job, finding something new. The industry has so many roles. There's so many positions open. It might not be exactly what you expected, but that doesn't mean it's not valid. I think something that is so overlooked is also being kind to yourself. These obstacles that I'm talking about, Sweeney, shush. These obstacles that I've been talking about, they're just in terms of the fact that we're women or different in some way. That doesn't mean you're not going to have other obstacles. So the more you can empower yourself and lean on people to empower you, it's going to help reduce the burden of these obstacles, and it will result in something that means that those other obstacles you might face, you can actually pay attention to. going forward, things are changing. Even in the last few years, the way that we talk about stuff has vastly changed. You know, wanting to improve diversity and inclusion isn't just kind of a thing to look good for a company anymore. People actually care. Events like this are becoming more and more normal. And that's really exciting. We need to continue pushing. We need to continue pushing for more young women getting into tech. We need to encourage, when things get hard, leaning on that support system. And like I keep saying, be open, be honest, make people uncomfortable with your honesty if that's what it takes. Because change doesn't happen. People don't give change. People fight for change. The women weren't given the vote. The women fought for the right for that vote. And the only way we're going to actually change the way that we're treated and get rid of the fact that this is even an obstacle is by gaining more allies, getting more people on board, actually making people confront their own biases. And ultimately, like I said, use the fact you stand out, network. I have bright pink hair and a service dog. I know people remember me, and I use that. I make sure that I actually talk to people, even if I'm not in the mood or it's uncomfortable. I reach out to people on LinkedIn. I respond to people. And people will remember the fact that you put that effort in. And with that, any questions, both in the audience or Slido?
That's plenty. So actually you have a comment, Sarah, saying out an amazing talk. So on questions.
Thanks.
How do you raise these issues without being flagged as a troublemaker?
I was called the troublemaker. That was, you know, I've been called much worse, believe me, and I wear that with pride. There's nothing wrong with being a troublemaker. You're not going to change things without making waves.
What advice do you have for making sure you are heard when in meetings?
This is a tricky one, especially with Zoom. I think in person, if people are just talking over you, stand up. Literally, that is what I've done, and everyone stops. And you then say, okay, you interrupted me. I've been trying to talk for 10 minutes. You know, I'm in this meeting for a reason. Let me speak. On stuff like Zoom, it's a bit trickier. You know, you can kind of message on the chat that no one ever actually sees. You can raise your hand, but ultimately just start speaking over them and be loud. Eventually they will hear you. And yeah, you might not be seen as, quote, professional at times. You might be seen as a troublemaker. So what? Just, like I said, if they can't appreciate you, find a new job. Find a company that will.
Someone says, I find women to be the harshest towards other women, including in a professional environment. How do you navigate challenging internal bias within our own gender?
So this is something that I actually originally was going to talk about and then felt like it didn't really fit. Some of the most overt sexism I've faced is from other women, more senior women who can't accept the fact that I'm progressing quickly in my career as a young woman, who find the fact that I like to make waves and I'm a troublemaker uncomfortable. And they feel like they had to pay, you know, you have to pay your dues. I don't think that that's right. I think our job is to make things better for future people, not make things harder. Just because I had to go through crap doesn't mean that somebody else should. In situations like that, this is where kind of having allies, especially where you work, can be really useful because it can help ground you and help, you know, it's not gossiping, it's checking in, right? Going, that was a wrong comment, right? And in situations like that, you just have to try and ignore them. And I know that's a hard thing, and I definitely struggle with that at times, but if they have such deep-seated internal sexism, they're going to be fighting to keep onto that, especially as things are changing and it's becoming more and more obvious that things are changing. To be honest, I don't have anger towards them anymore. I feel sorry for them that they feel that way towards their own gender and they can't recognize the fact that they went through unjust stuff.
Come on, an applause for sisterhood. What's one question you would ask a company in an interview to see if they value diversity and inclusion?
It really depends on how the interview is going. Something that I've done before is I've actually brought up times I've faced sexism as a reason as to why I'm leaving that company when asked, or things that might have pushed me over the edge. And how they respond to that, I can immediately tell if they're going to be the right environment for me. But I also ask, well, what do you guys actually do for diversity inclusion? You might say you do stuff, but you know, it might be on your website, but what are you actually doing? What do you believe in? Especially if you're interviewing with a manager, like your manager. An interview is, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So ask genuinely if there are things like there's communities that you might like, or do they do talks, or do they help encourage going on like training, stuff like that? See what they're actually doing and stuff that you can actually show is backed up. And to be honest, my like foolproof thing is actually just talking about this type of stuff in interviews. If it makes me uncomfortable, I know that we're not going to work well.
Final question. How would you approach a conversation with a colleague around one of these obstacles?
It depends on how close I am with that colleague. If it's someone who has been made comments that I can identify they might not realize are discriminatory or sexist, I will quietly pull them aside and say, like, look, I know you didn't mean it that way. Hope you didn't mean it that way, but that's how it came across. If it's about talking about experiencing that stuff, honestly, go for a walk, go for a coffee, somewhere that you feel safe to talk about it and that you feel like you have the privacy to talk about stuff so that you can be open and honest.
Thank you, Sarah.
No problem.
Wow, what an amazing evening. So thank you so much, speakers. Thank you for bringing your heart into the conversation, for sharing your experiences, for bringing the elephants into the room, into light, for sharing with us some of your tips for success as well. Hopefully you agree with me, this is just an appetizer in the beginning of the evening. I think there's much more conversations that hopefully we'll continue having throughout the evening. So please join us into a glass of wine or whatever drink of your choice. And thank you so very much for coming and joining us today. So as we close, can we have a very strong round of applause, not just to our speakers, but also to sisterhood.